Everyone, welcome to the video reviewing the performance of my solar array for the month of February 2022. First of all, just a big thank you to all of those of you who have subscribed. It's good to know that you are finding my content interesting. So if you've got any questions or comments, feel free to leave them and I'll do my best to try and answer them. But otherwise, let's get on with it. So first of all, the usual disclaimer, everything I talk about in this video is just my personal opinion and I'm not a qualified solar professional. I'm just sharing my experience with you. The other thing to mention is that it appears that Octopus Energy is now taking on new customers. They've got rid of that message on their website suggesting to stick with it. So if you are interested in switching to them just for your regular energy or to switch on to one of their smart tariffs, if you use the link that I've put on the screen, then you will get a discount on your first bill, and so will I. So just to recap on the equipment that I've got in my array, especially for those of you who are new. So my solar panels are made by Trina Solar. I've got 19 of them on the roof, and their theoretical max is 385 watts. I then have N-phase microinverters. So the way the system works is you have one microinverter behind each and every panel, and then you have one communication hub located in your house somewhere. Then for storage, I've got a Give Energy AC converter. So this takes the AC energy that pumps around your house and turns it into DC energy, which is then stored in my 8.2 kilowatt battery. And as part of the other items in my entire system, I have an Audi Q4, and therefore I need an EV charger, and I chose to go with the Hypervolt brand. I've got two of these installed in anticipation of another car coming later in the year. The other things which are part of my plan were to get a solar diverter so that some of the energy produced by the solar panels can go towards heating my hot water. At the time my system was installed, the installer said that they didn't have any of these in stock, so we put it on hold. And then I also want to switch my energy to Octopus. I'm currently stuck on British Gas. Due to the price hikes over the winter, I'm not really able to move yet. Even switching to the current tariff on offer from Octopus is more expensive than the tariff that I'm on. So for the time being, I'm going to stick with British Gas. In terms of the solar diverter from my energy, there's a few different ones on the market, but I've chosen to go with this particular one. It's called the Eddy, and we've ordered it. So it's going to be arriving shortly, and then in the next video, I'll give you an update of how that went. So let's move on to talk about February's performance. So this was a reasonably good month. It was quite interesting. It was obviously my best month on record so far. The first thing to mention is the chart on the top left. I only have partial data. The British Gas kind of analytics portal on their website has been broken for about 2 weeks. There's many people complaining about it, and British Gas have not fixed it yet. So I've kind of shown what I've got, but I've greyed out that information because it's not reliable. If you look at the chart on the top right, this is taken from N-phase Enlighten, which is their analytics portal. And basically the green arrows highlight the 5 best days that we had in the month. As well as being the 5 best days, they also were particularly good days. We generated an awful lot of power on those days, and with each successive one we were breaking a previous record that I had in the system. But basically what this is telling you is that my home consumed 525 kilowatts of energy in the month of February. 296 kilowatts was imported from the grid, so from British Gas, and 237 kilowatts was produced by my solar array across those different days. We have had a tiny amount of export, so there's 10 kilowatts which have been exported back to the grid, and the reason for this is that on some of the days there was a lot of cloud moving around. So when the sun shines through, the battery can't ramp up as quick as the power is being generated, so it gets pushed to the grid, and vice versa. So on that particular day, you can see there's a bar there, one of the ones with the green arrows, which show a grey chunk on the bottom, and that is indicating that the grid was acting as a buffer just to absorb the fluctuations in the amount of power at a moment. The other thing is that on a couple of days, the sunshine was so great that we were servicing our house, we had fully charged the battery, and we were still producing excess energy. And at the moment, we have nowhere for that to go, so it was pushed back to the grid. It was only 1 or 2 kilowatts, but we've got to that point. Overall, for the entire month of February, when the whole thing shakes out, 43% of our power was produced by the solar panels. So if you ask me, this is pretty good. It's a huge improvement on the month before, which was about 22%. And I've highlighted a particular day. So the chart on the bottom right homes in on the 27th of February. This is our best day so far. So you can see here that the solar panels produced 19.5 kilowatts in that day. And overall, we consumed 22 kilowatts, but this is not a real number because extra power is going into our battery. And if you look carefully on that chart, from midnight until about 3 a.m., it doesn't show that our house was consuming any power. That's because we had charge stored in our battery from the day before, and it took until 3 a.m. to drain the battery down to zero, and then our house started drawing current from the grid. So that's why you start to see bars at about 3 a.m. And then when we get to about 8 a.m., the blue bars start on that chart, which is when the sun shines and the solar panels are producing power. It's almost a really nice, perfect curve. You can see that when we get to about, looks like 5 p.m, that again our energy consumption goes down to zero and we're flatlining all evening. Again, this is because we've charged up the battery, and for all of those evening hours the battery is discharging and providing the power for our entire house. And similar to this day, the battery was able to keep the power going until about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning before we had to start pulling power from the grid. The only imperfection on this chart is around lunchtime. You see there's 3 bars there with a tiny bit of grey on the top. The reason for this is because we were testing out our immersion heaters on our water tank just to be sure they worked, because we were thinking about getting the eddy. So we were figuring out if it's possible or if we need to call an electrician to do some repairs. So that's why for a moment, as 2 immersion heaters were on, it spiked momentarily. I think the washing machine or something else was running at the same time. So on that particular day, 88% of all the energy we consumed was provided by the sun for free, and we only pulled a tiny amount from the grid. So that was a really fantastic day. And finally, the chart on the bottom left, it just shows the performance of each panel in my array across the entire month of February. So as I've said before, the top half are the panels on the front of my house facing east, and they are doing majority of the work. The panels on the rear of my house are starting to catch up. The sun's got a slightly higher track in the sky, so those panels are managing to catch a bit of sunlight in the afternoon before it sets. The panel that you see on the rear roof in the top right, the one which says it's produced 4.89 kilowatts in the month, something odd is happening with this particular panel. On an overcast day, it manages to produce roughly an equivalent amount of power to the rest of those panels on the rear roof. On a brighter day, when it's pure blue sky, that panel seems to produce less than it can normally do with ambient light, and it's significantly less than the other panels on the rear roof, which are catching a bit more sunlight. So it seems a bit odd to me. I'll keep on monitoring, but the fact that in better sunlight it is catching less light than it can with ambient light confuses me. So I'll see what happens, but just an observation to share. I don't think the panel or anything is broken. I think there's just an interesting fact there about the way the sunlight works and so on. Okay, the other things to mention then is Enphase updated their iOS app on the 10th of Feb, and it broke the array tab in the app. I waited a few days just to see if it would sort itself out, and it didn't. So I reported it to Enphase. They were quick to tell me, their team is ready and waiting for my feedbacks, if I can get in touch with them with some details about what version of iOS I'm running, which iPhone I've got, etc. So I contacted them, and then I've heard nothing, and they still haven't fixed anything. So that's a bit disappointing, but at least the Enlighten system using their web portal still works, and I can get to all the same information over there. All right, so that's a summary of February's performance. So last month I said that I fully expect that we'll get an entire day of consumption from green energy, So I was close in my prediction. 27th of Feb was the best day at 88%. And, maybe we could have got it to 89 or 90% if I hadn't tested out the immersion heaters on that day. So if you're finding these videos helpful and interesting, it would do me a big favor if you hit the like button down there at the bottom. And, feel free to subscribe if you want to get alerts for when I publish another video. So let's move on to some more information. So if I go on to the next page here, similar to last month, I'm showing you a breakdown of how much of my energy is produced by solar. So a quick recap, I had 2 incoming energy supplies into my house previously. So the blue bars represented the main portion of my house and the red bar represented the smaller portion with a second supply. In October, just prior to getting solar, I got them all combined into one supply. So everything feeds off the main house, the blue segment. And then from November, we got our solar array installed. So the green segments you start to see is the amount of solar power that we're producing, which forms the mix of our entire energy consumption. And then the little red bar on the month of January is how much new electricity that we're consuming that we never did before because we've got an electric vehicle. And finally, I've activated the grey segment on the bar, so it's on the bottom of the February segment, saying that we exported 10 kilowatts back to the grid. So even though we're exporting to the grid, I'm not yet getting paid any money for it because I'm still in the process of getting all the paperwork sorted out and get it activated. So when we look at the figures, in kilowatts it's going to show I exported, but when I measure it in pounds, I'm not going to get any income from that tiny little export. So let's look specifically at the bar for February. Net, our house consumed 525 kilowatts. Okay, 237 was made up from solar power and 288 was made up from energy we drew from the grid. Okay, and then we exported 10 kilowatts. So the key thing to mention is, one, in the month of February this year, we consumed about 100 kilowatts less than we consumed in the kind of prior months across winter. And year on year, if you compare it to February 2021, we've also consumed about 100 kilowatts less. So I'm not really sure what we've done in the house. I mean, we've been carrying on as normal, being a bit more careful about leaving lights and things on, but I don't know how we've managed to save 100 kilowatts worth of energy compared to previous Februaries or previous months. So regardless, that's a good thing. And that therefore shows that our mix of energy already, like I said on the previous slide, 43% is produced by solar power. So this is massive. This is making a huge dent in the amount of money we have to pay for energy back to the grid. So just to touch on the figures at the very top of the page. So far since we got our solar array installed, 579 kilowatts has been produced, which we haven't had to purchase from the grid. So far, year to date in the year of 22, we have produced 392 kilowatts. Solar cell back, only 10 kilowatts, even though we're not getting paid yet. And EV consumption is 43 kilowatts. There is no EV consumption in the month of February because the charge that we put into the car in January is still going. We haven't had to charge the car in the month of February. That's why you don't see anything there. Okay, and moving on to our payback curve. So, as I said last month, this is going to look pretty boring for a while until the lines start to spread out. I was kind of hoping we'd have a bit more of a dramatic change on the chart this month, but we haven't. So let me recap. Starting at all the numbers on the top left, we spent 17,423 in total as capital expenditure to get this entire system up and running. This is all the kind of groundwork that we had to do beforehand. So, our house wasn't straightforward. We had to get the floors lifted and stuff. The cost of actually getting the solar installed, which was about 13.5 grand, something like that. And also then the cost of getting the EV chargers installed. In pounds, the amount of money that we have saved by having solar panels is now at £120.76. The money we've saved by not purchasing diesel is £31.15. The money we've spent on new electricity to charge our electric car is £8.91. And those two numbers haven't changed since last month, the diesel and the EV charging costs. And that brings our OPEX savings to exactly £143 so far. Okay, so if I subtract 143 from the capex number, that leaves me a balance of 17,280 that I still need to recover to break even on the cost of this project. In percentage terms, I've now paid off 0.82% of my total expenditure, and the system has now been up and running for 3 months and 21 days when I took the screenshot, and based on a linear extrapolation, that means I've got 37 plus years before I break even on the system. Now, I would stress this is a linear extrapolation, so there's no account for seasonal variability. And of course, I've only been running for a few months, and they were probably the weakest few months in a 12-month period. So I fully expect as the rest of this year pans out, that forecast is going to get lower and lower, and then we'll settle on an average number. So just to highlight some of the numbers in the blue box then, so 236.9 kilowatts was produced by our solar array. Our unit price at the moment is 20 pence, 0.871. So if I multiply those two numbers together, I have saved £49.44. This is energy that I would have otherwise been buying from the grid, which I then generated for free. The numbers for the fuel stay the same, and that's how I get to the lifetime total of £143 saved. Like I said, the chart's pretty boring, but the blue line that you see at the bottom is starting to grow compared to prior month. All these lines were exactly on top of each other, and now the blue one is starting to break away. All right, but that's a summary of the performance for the month of February. Like I said, if you found it interesting, hit that like button. It really helps. If you've got questions about how I've done some of this analysis or comments, feel free to add it, and I will be sure to get back to you.